Welcome back to Just Another Solar Podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me, industry legend Nigel Morris. G'day, Nige.
G'day, Luke. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks. And Karl isn't here. He's flying back from Perth to Melbourne. But we do have Jess MacPherson from NRG Australia as a new addition. So welcome, Jess. G'day.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to see that Jess has taken up the guidance and mentorship of Karl by being in a car park somewhere.
I'm channeling my Karl today.
Excellent.
We've noticed you around the trade shows around the industry and also some of the media stuff you've been doing. And that encouraged me to give Jess a call in the last week. And Nige, we had discussed this and I said, I don't know how we'd fit Jess in to do something with the podcast. And in truth, we don't know, but we'll just see where it goes from here.
Yeah, no pressure, Jess, but you better bloody deliver. Come on.
I like a challenge. I'm in for anything.
Excellent.
That's good. So some of the news that's been happening, the really big news is that the much anticipated products accreditation announcement from the Clean Energy Regulator came out, and they've nominated the CEC to retain the products accreditation mantle. Now, there's a fair bit of pushback in the industry. I know there was a really good video by Glenn Morris, but the point is they've made the announcement and they're taking submissions until the 11th of August for those who don't agree with the decision, notably those who have been impacted by the delays in products accreditation. They don't think the cost of what they're paying actually matches the services they're getting. And let's face it, the fact that it went up for tender again shows that there was a lot of discord in the industry about the way the Clean Energy Council have been handling the products accreditation, and then they've been announced again. I don't want to get political amongst peak industry bodies. My opinion is that change would be a good thing, and all of you listeners out there will have a link in there. You may disagree. There's been some notable industry people who are supporting it, like James Sturge on the Facebook Cutters page, an impassioned plea, and good on him. And this isn't sheep stations on the line, but if you disagree with the decision, you've got till the 11th of August. We'll have a link. You can click and make a submission and say, no, we'd like a change. We'd like someone else doing it.
Yep, I think it's a really interesting one, and I encourage people to put in their submissions. And I'm surprised actually because, full disclosure, as we've said many times before, I sit on one of the advisory panels for the Clean Energy Council for the Product Approval Group, and so I've been involved around the fringes of that for many years. And I'm not involved in a day-to-day level, but every now and again there's a dispute, or we get asked about various strategic decisions and directions, and so we give some advice there, and I give it as an industry rep. And I have people ring me every now and again and say, "This is terrible. You got to lobby for this or get involved for that." So I've got a little bit of an inside view, and certainly in principle, I'm very supportive of the structure that the CEC has built around this. I do agree the pricing seems to be a real problem, and the delays are a real problem. And there are some resourcing challenges that appear to be causing some issues right now. And there are some things that I'd like to see changed too, which I've been very vocal about in the past. So I have to say I was actually surprised, Luke, that the CER, knowing that they got several submissions to take over the program, it was pretty interesting to me that the CER sat back and went, on balance, we're going to actually nominate the CEC. So clearly they did a good job on their submission. Good on them. I was quite surprised, actually. I thought it might be changed. So it'll be really interesting to see how everyone reacts in their submissions and whether someone can pick up the mantle. It is not a simple thing. And I think I saw James's post as well, and I thought it was really interesting because he highlighted that it is a very complex area and it is a very difficult area for people to manage, both from a practical and financial perspective. So I think there's a good opportunity for everyone to nominate another entity and see if they can get up.
To throw my 10 cents in, I'm pretty green in the industry. I don't want to pretend otherwise, but I feel that the Clean Energy Council were managing a hell of a lot until very recently. And I think it'd be really interesting to see, what they could do now that their resources are a little less split. Their focus would be less scattered than it has been in the past. So I think a lot of the criticisms I've heard around the timing of getting approvals back, for example, we feel that quite a lot here in SA. And I just love to see them have a chance to improve that at least. And, if they don't, and I don't know how often this goes around for the mantle being passed around either. So
never happened before, Jess.
Yeah.
Never. It's always been the CEC. The CEC kind of evolved a lot of these things. Actually, from installers 15, 20 years ago, it was installers who created the entities prior to the CEC, was turned into the CEC, and all the programs that we have today, the NetCC, which was the approved solar program, solar retailer program, the installer accreditation, and the product approval stuff is all stuff that has evolved over the last 10 or 15 years. So it's all sat with the CEC pretty much until recently.
So if we're looking for quick improvements, that's fine. I know for a fact that the Smart Energy Council put in a rival bid for this, and I did some muckraking, and I'm not going to talk about sources or anything else. I'm going to say that the feedback from the Clean Energy Regulator was that they were satisfied that the SEC could administer the program well, and that they did have a roadmap and they did have a structure that would work for it. So there's at least one other viable candidate, and I believe the CEC's had a good run with it. So looking for short-term improvement for a program that's been running for years now, I think is overly generous. But that's my opinion. I don't want to lose friends over this, purely opinion there. So another interesting one. So coming back to the Clean Energy Council, they did host the Australian Clean Energy Summit this week in Sydney, and seemed to be a lot of great speakers there. I didn't attend this one, but, there was a lot of media stuff coming out and interesting things, all the usual, Malcolm Turnbull's and the like, and a lot of the activists, some of the champions of the industry that we love, like Andy McCarthy. Reminder, you can pre-order his book that's coming out in a couple of weeks as well. Andy was there, but the best one was Ted O'Brien, the Shadow Energy Minister, who the week they announced the nuclear strategy, I got to meet with Ted at our local MP's office over here in WA and dismantled it to him. So Ted's got up in front of the clean energy industry and basically said, hey, you guys have it a little bit right, but mostly wrong. We've got a different strategy, nuclear. Don't worry about our commitments. Don't worry about rolling out renewables. We need to start curtailing that. So when we get nuclear online in 15 years, then everything's going to be hunky-dory. What do you reckon, guys?
Wow. How did that go down?
I mean, as predicted, Giles Parkinson's out there having a dig at it, and some of the other commentators around the industry are quite rightly having a bit of a dig at Ted about what he's done. What are your thoughts?
Well, we've told. I swore.
Have we got it wrong, Nige?
Well, we swore a lot the last time we talked about nuclear. No, we haven't got it wrong. Like I said last time, it's and dare I say, it's the Mexican Wall approach is my view. It's you don't actually have to build it. You just got to talk about it, and you can look like a hero, and just faff around the edges. So I don't think it stacks up in any way, shape, or form, And like I've said before, I don't think half those people who are talking about it actually believe it'll stack up. I think it's about just getting in power. Yeah, I didn't hear Ted's speech or read anything about it, so I don't know what he said yet. But seems like a strange thing to say at a renewables conference, I have to say.
Absolutely. And then Chris Bowen, the National Energy Minister, went to the National Press Club on Wednesday and basically showed all the holes in the strategy. And really just echoed the same things that you were saying in the last episode, Nige, that it's not even about them getting it up. It's about drawing a line in the sand. So it doesn't make business sense. It doesn't make environmental sense in the short term. What are we going to do in the next 15 to 20 years before we bring them online? Do we abandon the Paris Agreement like Trump did?
So I saw a really interesting comment that people are mighty scared of renewables to be more scared than of like a nuclear apocalypse kind of situation. Like the risk comparison is it's a real tough sell for I think most of us, right?
Absolutely, Jess. And I reckon at this point we have another stellar guest. Today we've got Dr Richard Corkish, who is just very, very recently retired as a Chief Operating Officer of the Australian Centre for Advanced Photovoltaics. He's an honorary senior lecturer at Uni of New South Wales School of Photovoltaic and Renewable Energy Engineering. Now, I've copied and pasted this from LinkedIn, so this is all factual. And he's the founder and manager of the Uni of New South Wales ERV, which is, we're going to go into that, I'm sure, a passion project that Dr. Richard has founded. But it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today, Richard.
Thanks very much, Luke. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello, Jess, and hello, Nigel.
Hey, Rich. And full disclosure, I know Richard from way, way back when he was. What, were you a grad student then when we first met, Richard?
No, I just got my PhD.
PhD.
I hadn't been awarded my PhD, but I had submitted it at UNSW and met you up at Nimbin at Rainbow Power Company, where we worked together for a little while. So,
That's right, and that's the better part of 30 years ago. So there's two very grey-haired people on this on the video that you can't see, but there's a couple of old grey guys on here. And
one was less hair than the other.
Yeah. But I had the pleasure of meeting you all those years ago, Richard, and when I went to your little farewell recently, it prompted me to think, geez, there's people in the university and academic and research sector doing so much for our industry, and it's so hidden. It's in the background, and we just Luke and Jess and I are out there just pounding the pavement and selling and installing and doing all those things every day, and it's really easy to forget how much is going on in the back end. So it's wonderful to have you on here. Why don't you start, Richard, by giving us your story? Give us the short version of your history and your story.
Okay, well, thanks, Nigel, and yeah, it's great to see you again, and thanks for coming along last week. Actually, I listened to your last podcast. Thank you, but you sort of way overplayed my role in all this relative to people like Martin Green and Renata Egan. So I think they deserve, particularly Martin deserves, much more notice in the industry than I do. I'm a mere helper, but thanks for inviting me on. And so I grew up in Victoria as a son of teachers in the 1960s, and I finished high school and I went to be a trainee at the Electricity Commission of Victoria. And that's its previous Electricity Commission of Victoria. It's been reborn since then, just recently, and worked in their radio section. I went through trade school then, or wasn't called TAFE then, but it was sort of like TAFE college, and then went to do a Bachelor of Engineering at RMIT after that. And after that, I moved to Sydney and joined CSIRO Radio Physics and worked on ground station antennas for satellite communication, which was a lot of fun, technically a lot of fun, but sort of ethically not so wonderful. I guess it wasn't doing much good for the world, I thought, and it sort of much too tightly aligned to the military. Most of the market for all that high frequency stuff is military market, so it's just a little bit tainted, it felt to me. So I'd become aware of Martin Green's preeminence and the group that he'd built here at UNSW in solar energy technology with world records. And Australia was, I couldn't think of another technical area at that time, and perhaps not since, where Australia has had that research leadership of being right at the forefront, and particularly for such a long time. My wife was good enough to allow me to give up a job for life and go back to school and to support us for a while. And I did a PhD with Martin as supervisor, and then went up for a little while to Rainbow Power, where I met you, Nigel, and then we returned to Sydney, and I got back to working at the university, and I sort of haven't really escaped since, to be honest.
You retired 2 weeks ago, and I know that you're recording this from the university as we speak. So how's retirement going for you, Richard?
Yeah, you're not really letting go there, are you, Rich?
Sort of partial retirement. So I still have I still have a PhD student that I'm looking after, so I'll be his supervisor until he's finished. And I still have a group of bachelor students and master's coursework students that I supervise for my passion project that maybe we can talk about a bit later. So they still need me. I always did them effectively as a volunteer before anyway. It's sort of on top of my paid job. So I'm going to try and continue that for as long as I can.
Just and again, I mean, we have a lot of installers, new companies, old companies, all sorts of people who maybe haven't been lucky enough to connect with the people at the UNSW and other institutions like I've been able to over the years. What were you doing all that time?
Keeping our head down, but I guess there's sort of been a bit of a separation of the research and development community and the industry, the installers and the companies selling into the market. But all those products that are being sold into the market all came out of R&D institutions originally, and it's sort of got a bit forgotten, I think. separated and sort of moved on, and we don't need them anymore, and just get on with making money, and that's all good. But before Suntech started the boom in solar manufacturing in China, and that came directly out of this laboratory at this university. If that hadn't happened, I've argued to ARENA and other funding bodies in Canberra that without that having happened, we wouldn't have had the Paris Climate Change Agreement, because we wouldn't have had, those ministers wouldn't have had the tools or the options to say, yes, we can do something about this, let's choose to do it, rather than just say what they'd said at all the other COP meetings, and it's really bad, it's terrible, I'll see you next year. And they actually chose to do something, and that was because they had lower cost wind energy and lower cost solar energy to make the case. So we're very proud that that happened, and that it sort of happened to have happened directly through this lab, and the Chinese manufacturing boom all came from that. And
would you have envisaged it back then that we'd be in 2024 and have somewhere near a terawatt worth of production capacity of solar modules?
Happened faster than I thought, to be honest. It's sort of hard to say. Yeah, well, I suppose in our wildest dreams we probably did, but how confident we were that it would happen is another thing. I guess I remember one time thinking, well, people will take on solar eventually, but only after all the coal and gas is burnt. And actually, that was quite silly to think, because there's an immense amount of coal. And that was silly. But I didn't think that we'd actually shut down fossils, because it's cheap, but it's actually not cheap now compared to our product. And for the people of this group, and I was just a tiny cog in a machine in this, of being really important players in making that feasible. It's important. So what have we been doing all that time? Improving the technology. So all along that time, the technology of silicon solar cells has been getting better, continues to get better. So the records that you see being broken now are being broken by manufacturing companies, because they have R&D teams of 600 people, for example, in one company. And those teams are so well resourced, they're going to be pushing the edge now. And laboratories and universities can't afford to play in that game anymore. But we can go the next step. So we are looking at things like what's happening with end of life, developing technology for end of life, what's happening with reducing degradation mechanisms. So this is a very quiet thing that's just sort of happened without any notice, really, or without much notice, of the hydrogenation technology that came out of work led by the late Professor Stuart Wenham here at UNSW for hydrogenation. So into pushing monatomic hydrogen into the silicon material, inside between the silicon atoms, in particular charge states, very controlled way, in order to reduce the degradation mechanisms that cause that. The PV modules used to be sold with 80% after 20 years. Well, that 20% was largely degradation mechanisms that many of which can be addressed now through hydrogen, and are routinely at manufacturing stage. So they're sort of pre-degraded, and then the degradation is undone at the manufacturing stage. So that main degradation mechanism is quite controllable now.
That's a great example. So does that? Well, am I reading this right? And forgive me for not knowing more, but am I reading it right that the role that the unis play is really pushing the boundaries of R&D and trying to get ahead of the curve? Because once something becomes obvious, back surface fields, P-type, N-type, all those kinds of things that you guys pioneered, the role for universities and the students that you have managed over the last couple of decades is really, we're going to be at the forefront before this gets into the world, before this becomes a real production technology. We're going to see if there's actually something that we can do about it before it can actually commercially be done. And that's the role that you play. And then when you prove that it can be done, you flog it off to someone. Is that, is that fair?
Flogging off is nice. So it used to be that
hopefully,
you take out patents, the industry waits until the patent expires and then implements it.
Right.
So you don't make money out of it anyway.
So which horse should we be backing? Sorry to jump in there, Richard, but We've seen
It's like
TopCon.
insider trading now, right?
Yes, we've seen TopCon become one of the main designs. We've seen HJT. We know that there's perovskite and tandem perovskite cells that are testing over 40% in the lab. Do you think it's going to continue as separate streams, or are we going to see a consolidation and a clear winner?
I think we'll probably see a winner and then maybe another winner later. PERC has been the dominant technology. That was a technology that came out of this university. So there's really two contenders now for silicon solar cells for the next generation, and that's TopCon and heterojunction. They're both very good technologies. The transition from PERC to TopCon is much simpler than the transition from PERC to HJT or heterojunction. So that sort of encourages the TopCon transition. So I think there's probably likely to be more of that in the short term, but probably eventually a transition to heterojunction. To be honest, my finger is no longer very tightly on that pulse. So you probably should ask people whose fingers are tightly on that pulse rather than me. But
ask the nearest solar sales guy. He'll have an answer for you.
Right,
What's your opinion?
Yeah.
I think you've got a really good finger on the pulse, Richard, because that's what we're seeing at the moment. Like the premium singular company that does heterojunction cells is having an especially hard time in the current Australian market. I think we could all say, versus the TopCon is very competitively priced by comparison. So I think if the market was in a sort of a different place to what it has been in the last 6 months, maybe the story would be slightly different, but it'd be largely the same.
But I think we need to take account also of the fact that PERC has been in the market for a long time. It's been manufactured by lots of companies over a long history, and the bugs have been ironed out. Every new technology will have failure modes that aren't immediately obvious, will be found with experience, and that's a role for universities as well, of doing that as an independent research organisation, to be looking at how they fail. Can they fail? What do we have to be careful with? And some of my colleagues from UNSW have been publishing about this, about new mechanisms where technology can fail. So they're not all the time. They're not, it's not terrible, but it's just something we need to get right rather than allow to get wrong. So we need to know what might go wrong, and that's something that a company's R&D lab, even if they know it, they're probably not going to be speaking about it.
Yeah. They're focused on building more, right? Yeah. I remember when we had the plant in Homebush, and there was a regular stream of UNSW folks coming in and chatting with our guys in production and trying to identify those glitches and those things that were stopping us from getting consistently high efficiency or consistent outputs on the line using the various different machines that we had, and that's a hugely valuable role. The other bit that I picked up on actually when I was chatting with a couple of colleagues at your function the other week was, it can't be undersold. Tell us how many students go through the uni every year. I mean, it was highlighted to me that these kids have all got to go somewhere. They've all got to go get a job somewhere. That's the goal out of going to uni and going to the Centre for Photovoltaics, and they're scattered all over the world and all these different organisations. But how many go through every year on average?
Not sure of the numbers. I was head of school for 10 years, but that was a while back. But I can sort of probably tell you those numbers. I'm not, again, my finger's not on that pulse, but we've got something a bit shy of about 80, I think, PhD students, I think, in our school. The undergrads is a bigger number than that, but I'm not too sure. But you're quite right. They're all over the place. We've been graduating since the early 2000s now, and I love to go to the industry shows in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever, because so many of the people in the room were the ex-students, and usually on the other side of the stand, behind the counter, not in front.
Amazing.
Working for Australian companies. There's also a lot of elsewhere in the world, and particularly in China, in the major manufacturing companies. It's really nice, the international conferences, to bump into the ex-students who are now the CTO of one of the biggest manufacturers in the world, or the CTO of several of the biggest manufacturers in the world, from the people that I knew as students. Yeah, it's wonderful. Actually, it's a great contribution. I think it's
an amazing contribution. I mean, those organisations wouldn't exist, and the technology wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the thousands of students who've gone through UNSW and been trained by your colleagues and yourself over the years,
Yeah,
right?
it's a lot of it. There's been a good group at ANU as well that has been operating for a bit of a shorter history, but a very proud history as well, and generating excellent students coming out there as well, or excellent graduates coming out there as well. So yeah, Australia has had a huge impact on the technology particularly of silicon solar cells in the world. So to come back to the question, Luke, before about so I guess there's heterojunction and TopCon, but there's also a lot of talk about perovskite material. So the issue here for me is there's been a big concentration on efficiency, and that's not unreasonable, but it's not right that it should be only on efficiency. So we need to pay a lot of attention to stability. So through my work history, I've seen lots of contenders for alternatives to crystalline silicon, right from amorphous silicon way back, dye-sensitized, the whole string of them that have been touted as the next big thing. They're not the next big thing anymore. But there's another next big thing. So I'm a bit cautious about jumping on the bandwagon, I think. And I'd like to see, I think we need to see a lot of progress on stability. And having a tandem device where you put a layer, you have a very stable, long life silicon solar cell, and you put another material on top of it. That material has to have a similar lifetime to the silicon underneath of that. Or you'd have to have very special conditions where if it fails in a way that it can allow the silicon to still continue operating, which is quite challenging, I think. Yeah, efficiency is great on perovskite, but we really need to see a step up in the stability, I think.
How far away is it? I mean, it seems it's the golden child, right? It's the one that keeps popping up in the media every now and again when someone wants to talk about what's the next big thing in PV, and perovskite keeps popping up. But everything I see sort of says, look, it's still this stability issue means that it's still maybe 10 years away, right?
Yeah, it's not the only thin film material that's been investigated for going on top of silicon in a tandem device. So the tandem device is the most likely of the set of ways there is to get beyond the limits that applies to any single material solar cell. So we call the Shockley-Queisser limit, like the William Shockley and Hans Queisser, a very famous paper from the 1960s, where they
we've all read it.
Worked out that paper. Yeah, of course you have. You know it by heart, I'm sure.
I have it.
Yeah, Jess, come on. I need a quote
You
from
didn't give
chapter
me a reading
63.
list. No, I'll read it.
It's not that long, actually.
That's a markdown for you, Jess.
But they worked out that with the sun of this, the sun being our sun, the sun at the temperature it is, the Earth being at the temperature it is, being the distance away from the sun, this is the maximum you can hope to get from that sort of structure. So a single material solar cell. So silicon is not the best single material. There are other more expensive materials, such as those used for satellites, but that's just not practical to use on the Earth. They're rare materials. Silicon is sort of the compromise, I guess, in lots of ways. We'd like to add something on top of silicon to get beyond that limit for a single so we can, there's a group of ways that, and a tandem is probably the most likely to be realized. So we put another material on top of it to have effectively two solar cells, each of which uses a different part of the solar spectrum, and we add their electrical outputs. And so you can do better than the 29-30% limit that the silicon is limited to. We really want to get beyond that limit. And the tandem is the most likely way of doing it. So the R&D community, very, very keen to find this material of what it's going to be. And we've got lots of materials that have been tried and that are being tried, but none of them meet all of the criteria of stability, of making good solar cell, being compatible with silicon, of being able to, having the same, very mechanical thing of having a similar thermal expansion coefficient. If it's going to sit on top of it, stuck to it, and the temperature changes, you don't want it peeling off it. So there's lots of very practical and some quite detailed criteria that material needs to meet. And we've got many that meet almost all of them, but not really yet. We haven't really cracked it for the material that meets all of them. And that's still a very active area of
So,
research.
I mean, it just highlights the incredibly valuable and essential role that the universities have to me. I
Got me
think
convinced, Nigel.
yeah, I think the Minister for Energy listens to the show. If you're listening, to throw these guys a bone and give them some more funding for goodness sake, because
Here.
yeah, it's so essential.
Arena has actually been very generous for us, very supportive. So this Australian Centre for Advanced Photovoltaics that I've just stepped away from has been funded until 2030. After 10 years of funding, and before that, the Australian Solar Institute funded us and ANU as well in a strong centre then as well. Should acknowledge that the federal government has supported us through all the time I've been here. A lot of that has been Martin's excellence in both research but also writing grants, grant applications. And the government has usually been conscious that this is a very special topic in Australia. Very odd to have excellence in technological area where the manufacturers of that technology are not existing in the country. So they were when BP Solar was here and SolarX, but not since then. And it's a very odd situation, but we have been acknowledged and supported rather nicely. Of course, more is always good. Of course, and if we have more funds and more people, we can do more stuff. Of course.
And with the Solar Sunshot program, which is $1 billion committed so far, that only reaches so far. So speaking to some of the prospective manufacturers and existing ones, they say that new solar manufacturing plants and cell manufacturing plants, there's very few that are smaller than 3-4 gigawatts being built at the moment. Because, of course, you get the scale, and that's where the market's at. Now, $1 billion doesn't reach that far in terms of setting all of that up. You don't even get to have a look at, further upstream components and all the rest of it. But I still applaud the government, because some people have said it was a missed opportunity, that there were these technologies that were developed at the same school that you've been at for a long time, and then they went to China, there was mass production. Could we have scaled up production like that? I highly doubt it, but did we miss the opportunity to go beyond BP and everything else? I mean, there's already lots of debate in that area. I wanted to jump from this and pick up on something you mentioned earlier, Richard, which was around end of life of solar panels. Now, we've seen the Queensland government has a stewardship program now in conjunction with the Smart Energy Council. I was speaking to Darren Johansson from the SEC just this week, and it's really interesting to hear some of the issues. What we've seen is that there's been an attitude in Australia that we have secondhand panels because of the STC program. We're seeing working panels put off roofs to be replaced with more efficient panels. A lot of them get sent to other countries in Africa, Middle East, Asia. I spoke to one of the guys who's been exporting secondhand panels to Africa for 4 years, and he said he made a loss last year, and he said that the market in Nigeria and Congo specifically are awash with secondhand panels. Now, the first issue there is that I don't believe we should be passing out end-of-life issues to countries where we're not sure what they're going to do with it. So part of that is there's been conversations around a test and tag program for secondhand panels. By the time you actually get on to test and tag it, all of the logistics involved, the fact is that you can buy a brand new 440 watt TopCon panel for cheaper than what it would cost for a secondhand 300 watt panel that's been tested and tagged. Do you see, first of all, I want to hear your opinion, Richard, just on where we stand in terms of our responsibility for the end of life of solar panels and also the opportunities that might be there to repurpose them.
I sort of do this a little bit myself in that my passion project in Vanuatu, I do use secondhand panels, but ones that I have a lot of confidence in, and I'm going back there anyway. So if there's a problem, I'm going to deal with it. But I feel I'm a bit torn. I really hate the idea of working stuff going to landfill or going to waste or going to even to recycling when it actually is perfectly working order. So it's sort of a bit unfortunate this doesn't seem to be able to be allowed to happen in Australia. It's really there's a bit of a bad taste in my mouth to be thinking, that how are people in the receiving countries of this seeing this as, it's good enough for you, but you wouldn't use it yourself. don't like us being in that position, actually, I think. But I know the people doing that, and I've spoken to some of them too, at length. I think they're very well-meaning, they're very well-intentioned, they're not, they're trying to do the right thing. I sort of don't really like the right thing they're doing, but I can see their argument. Well, I think we need to find ways where we can allow the use in some situations, I think, but not in others. So we need to avoid them perhaps without sufficient testing, in particular of electrical safety testing, being put in long high voltage strings. But if one was, say, I was just in country Victoria earlier this week, and I've seen PV on big properties in Western Victoria running the gate opener, the automatic gate opener. They're driving the car, push the button, the gate opens. That's run by solar. There's no electric shock possibility there. So using for that, for, low voltage applications in pumping and off-grid situations, I really find it hard to see what the issue is. Why we should try and find a way to allow this, I think. I can see that how do you then prevent them going into big arrays where they're going to be operating at high voltage? And I don't have all the answers to that, to be honest, but I share your concern that the cost of testing is way too high. It's higher than it doesn't make sense. You can't justify it. So there's people working, so there's colleagues of mine, for example, who are doing, flying drones over arrays and doing photoluminescence imaging, which is sort of light. The photo is light is exciting electrons and holes in those solar cells, and they're taking an image of the quality of the solar modules and solar cells.
Sort of heat mapping them, right?
What's a different sensor? They're not quite. Heat mapping is measuring the infrared camera. This is also infrared camera that's looking for different signals. So you're actually exciting the signal. So a solar cell will actually radiate if you put electricity into it, and it's called electroluminescence. But to make it electroluminesce, you have to connect up wires to it, and you don't really want to be doing that. You want to do it remotely, without touching it. So you can do that with photoluminescence if you can control the light. So you're actually using sunlight in daylight and getting this imaging, sharp images, which, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, no, you're joking. You can't possibly do that. But they've done it. So there are advances in testing. They could be tested in the field en masse to a level. The electrical safety testing still is quite challenging, I think. And the cost of sort of just connecting up and doing the test and recording the result, like you say, you could have bought a new one for that. So it's very hard to see how we can make a business out of it. But I think we need to work hard on this and try and find applications where it doesn't really matter that much. Firstly, if it fails, it can be easily replaced. And secondly, and somebody is willing to replace it. And B, you oversize it. So if it fails a bit, maybe it doesn't matter for a long time. The gate openers on those remote properties, for example, you put two panels on, and if they degrade over the years, then so what? It's oversized in the first place. I think we need more effort on, finding those applications. Of course, all of them are going to come to end of life eventually. They really end of life. So we do want to recover the materials. We particularly want to recover the materials from the older modules, because the amount of silver per watt rating in the older modules is much more than, so the industry has been very good at reducing the silver that goes into them, particularly getting back those old modules and recovering the materials cleanly. My final PhD student is focused on the glass. So the glass is not everyday glass. It's low iron. It's tempered glass, which means we can't resize it afterwards. We can't cut it or drill it or anything. But the material it's made of is very low in iron to give very high transparency. And that ultra clear glass is made from special sand. So this is bright white sand. Australia has a lot of this sand, exports a lot of this sand from Far North Queensland at the moment, and there's other deposits too. But it's not at all obvious that there's going to be enough of that accessible in places where mining is going to be permitted and should be permitted to maintain I guess we're working on a 3.4 terawatt per year manufacturing that we need to have in order to globally in order to counter global warming. There's a lot of materials got to go into that.
And it makes sense that one problem can solve another, because the amount of leftover or old panels is absolutely on the rise. And not only as systems age or people's needs increase over time, but as regulations get more sophisticated, it often leaves behind old systems. And it's a big issue that we're having here in SA, where the old systems don't comply, and you can't have part of a site not comply. You need to have the whole site, which for customers is very motivating, because they don't really care about their 8 panels from 15 years ago. But you're quite right. There's probably some really good bits and bobs in there. And if we could scavenge them and put them to better use without it costing an arm and a leg.
So if they're still working well, then we should try and find use for them. If they are going to come off it. I think there's also some perhaps less important reasons why they're being replaced. Maybe young people don't like the look of them, or they don't want 2 types on their roof just from an aesthetic point of view.
True. Yeah.
Or the installer wants to sell more, and encourages them to just get rid of it, and we'll start from scratch again. So
now I'm conscious that we're going to run out of time soon, Richard, and I wanted to come back to your passion project. Some of the best times I've ever had in solar is when you hear stories about people in developing countries' lives being changed, just completely reshaped by the delivery of a little bit of energy, whether it's a light in a hut, or whether it's being able to charge a phone and, negotiate with the fish market so that they can suddenly increase their income, or whatever it is. There are these wonderful stories that I've been lucky to hear and see over the years. Tell us about what you've been doing in Vanuatu, because I know that's something you've been chipping away at for ages. You're putting some secondhand solar over there, but you're also doing some hydro stuff over there. What have you been doing over there? Question number 1. Question number 2, what has that led to? What are some of the stories that you've seen in terms of changes? And I guess question number 3, how are you going to keep that going now that you've got a whole list of jobs, I recall, that you have to do because you've got time on your hands.
My wife does expect me to cook more. It's true. and a lot of other things too. Yeah, so since 2007, 2008, I've been going to this island called Tanna in the south of Vanuatu. A lot of the Australians who do go there mainly go there as tourists to see active volcano, which you can actually stand on the rim of and look into the hole in the middle, the crater. It's a very poor island of a very poor country. It's a country that is the most disaster prone in the world, where cyclones come regularly, very big cyclones sometimes. So that island was really thrashed in 2015 by Cyclone Pam. There's been many others since then, but none for that island as devastating. But in the north of Vanuatu, just as devastating since then, more recent. They just keep on coming. They have earthquakes. They have volcano ash activity that kills their gardens and stops them feeding themselves. So just crisis after crisis, and all the health crises that go with that. The national airline has failed a few months ago, so there's no air transport between the islands at the moment. It's just, you just got to feel sorry for that people. It's just trouble on trouble. But we've been been taking students, so it's sort of a bit of a two-pronged. One is to expose the students, get their hands dirty, get their sleeves rolled up and have them make something. Have them make something and have the thrill and the pleasure of seeing it work and knowing that it's something that's actually is really useful to somebody as well. It's nice. I feel that when I do it, and they feel it too, and it's fun. So they get exposed to get a lot more hands-on. The people in the island get the benefit of the systems that we build. They're quite small, very modest. Just small, low-power LED lights, lead-acid batteries, charge controller, and second-hand PV. For little health centres, particularly, it's sort of our bread and butter project. But there's a little village huts, really, with tin sheds sometimes, with dirt floors sometimes. But these are the places where a lot of the babies are born, where, the first point of contact if somebody's ill or injured. Until we come, there's not even a light, or there's only a phone light if somebody has been able to charge a phone. So we set up just LED lighting there. DC systems, no inverters, so it doesn't encourage abuse or lots of other loads being added, and phone charging, so USB outputs for phone charging. And this is very low cost, the simplest of PV systems, and it's just makes a big impact in those villages, which are a long way from the nearest otherwise medical help. I had just a couple of my students who now went on to found 5B in Sydney back in 2019, 2010. They did hydropower systems in the village there, which got smashed up in that Cyclone Pam in 2015, but has since been replaced by another organisation with our support. So that generated heaps of electricity actually for that village, and it was for two schools, a boarding school and a primary school as well, and the medical centre there as well. And that's back now. We're very happy to see with our PV and the other companies, the other organisations, hydro combined together. We've got a lot of students looking at combining water supply from gravity-fed water supply, combining that with hydroelectric generation potentially. I haven't actually built any of them yet. We've dabbled a little bit in geothermal because there's a volcano. There's a lot of heat there. So that's using that for low heat for drying crops, for example, dehydrating crops for storage. Yeah, it's great. It's great fun. So there's, I guess, lots of little low-key stories. I haven't really got a sort of a big bang of, this person became a billionaire. I'll
post a link as well in the show notes. I'll post a link in the show notes so listeners can jump in and have a look for themselves as well. It's really unreal. And if there's any way people can support you as well, I'm sure that there'd be links through there.
Very, very open to that.
I think your retirement's looking really busy, actually.
It is a bit busy. Yeah. It sort of feels sort of the same at the moment, but I'm hoping it will. It's a bit. This coming trip to Vanuatu is a bit messy because the airline has gone broke, and so we don't quite know how we're going to get between islands, and therefore we don't know when we're going to get back. So we don't know how to book. We can book booking accommodation and booking flights home and things is a bit more interesting than usual, but it's an adventure. So I'll have 14 students, I think. 13, 14 students going with us. So, they're really keenly looking forward to it, and it'll be fun.
Well, good on you, Richard, for taking the next generation through like that. And there's nothing like going on an adventure and just putting a light in someone's house that's never had a light before, or, being able to keep vaccine cold so that a health clinic can operate. I mean, you're talking about the fundamentals of life there, and that's where, when you
very basic but very important.
Exactly right. So good on you for taking those people through there.
Now, we don't have time for much more, so I'm just going to have a whip around for any last comments. And I'm going to start with you, Jess.
Richard, I think that's just so incredible. Like, what an inspiring thing. We here in Australia, we take it for granted, and I'm sure those students will never feel the same about flicking a light switch again. Like, yeah, what amazing work. I think you were a bit humble in the beginning. Sounds like you're doing quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, I still remember back in the 1980s and 1990s, every publication that you pick up, and including some that I wrote, would start with, there are 5 billion people in the world without basic energy services. Well, there sort of still are, and maybe not 5, but whatever, there's still a lot. And we sort of forgot them in a little way, when it became profitable to be putting it on roofs in big cities, then we sort of forgot them. So a lot of the people who did work in that area, they still do, but the industry has sort of moved its focus elsewhere. But yeah, we hope they're still there. They still need a bit of help, and it's good for our students.
And last comments, Nigel?
I'm a little bit emboldened to hear people talking about the fact that the market seems to be picking up a bit. That's good news. I think we need to get out of this cold snap that the entire east coast of Australia is in, so that everyone can feel a bit more motivated. But we passed the equinox. The sun's going to start shining soon for all the businesses out there. Just hang in there. I reckon August is going to be a cracker. And
I'm not going to mention the 24-degree day we had 2 days ago here in Perth, because that's just slack on you East Coasters.
Please don't.
And Dr. Richard Corkish, it's been great to have a chat with you. Congratulations on your achievements in well, first in your career, but it looks like even into your retirement, you're going to be having a big impact. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Do you have any last comments?
Let's try to remember the impact that R&D has had and is having and will have. And yeah, remember all this technology is based on probably lots of PhD students working away very hard and at low key and under the radar, and it all matters a huge amount. Keep them remembered.
So true. Here's to all the PhDs out there, and here's to the people like you guiding them along, Richard.
And thanks to Jess for joining us. Jess MacPherson. We'll hear from you in future episodes as well, I'm sure. So thank you for popping in.
Thanks for having me. No, I'll always have a yarn with you guys, and it's very inspiring. I'm really appreciative that I get to hear about, the building blocks that make what I get to do every day sing. That's pretty exciting. I have a few stories for some clients now.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to rabbit on.
Thank you. We do it every fortnight, Richard.
Yeah.
We wrap it on.
Slotting right in, mate. Slotting right in.
Edit severely.
That's it. And thanks to you listeners. We appreciate the feedback and the support, and that, people share stuff and you follow us. So remember, if you haven't subscribed or clicked like on our socials, please do that just so we can get further reach, and we'll catch you next time.